Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are undertaking, well, a really in-depth journey, a real deep dive into the rule book of the National Basketball Association. And, it's not just some dry list of regulations. It's actually a living document. Tells the story of the game itself.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, we're going to use this stack of sources. You've got articles, historical accounts, all that stuff to trace how the rules of pro basketball really evolved from the founding, back in the 40s, all the way up to the rule set that kind of defined the game in 2010.
Right. And our mission, it's pretty clear. We want to unpack the most pivotal rule changes, but maybe more importantly, understand why they happened. These weren't just random decisions, right? They were responses to the game itself.
Exactly. To dominant players, to new strategies coaches were coming up with, changes in pace, and let's be honest, the constant push to make the game more fun for fans to watch.
So we'll use the NBA rules as they were in 2010 as our baseline, always kind of looking back to see how things changed and what that meant by then.
Yep. But to really get 2010, you got to go way back. Right back to the beginning, look at some really foundational rules laid down even before, say, 1965, which is where a lot of the modern stuff starts clicking in.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack this incredible journey through the decades of NBA rules. So before we really dive into that post-65 era, it feels impossible to understand the game we saw in 2010 without hitting on some absolutely fundamental changes from the very beginning, the BAA days even.
Oh, I really can't. The league, it faced some, let's call them existential challenges early on, these first big rule changes. They were almost desperate measures, really, just to keep the game watchable. Think about the very first major one from 46-47, banning zone defense.
Banning zones right away. That sounds weird compared to today.
It does, doesn't it? But yeah, midway through that first season, BAA season that is, January 9th, 1947, they outlawed it. And the context is key here. Early Pro Bowl was just slow, really low scoring compared to college. Teams would just pack defenders into the lane.
Right, you mentioned that infamous game, 1918. Was that Pistons-Lakers?
That's the one. 19-18. Over a full game, it sounds excruciating.
Yeah, painfully boring.
It was. Teams would just hold the ball. For minutes sometimes. So banning the zone, the purpose was explicit. Force man-to-man defense. The idea was, okay, let's open up the court, create space, get some one-on-one action going, make it more dynamic.
And it did actually work.
Well, the historians, they generally agree it did, at least for a while. It's credited with giving the early pro games some needed pace, some excitement, and that forced man-to-man approach. That was the default in the NBA for decades.
Okay, but comparing that to 2010, it's fascinating because by 2010, zones were totally legal again.
Totally legal, yep. The original ban was long gone. Zones got re-legalized in 2001. But, and this is really important, they learned from the past. When they brought zones back, it came with a brand new rule. The defensive 3-second rule.
Ah, right, the anti-camping rule. Can't just park in the paint.
Exactly that. A defender couldn't just stand in the lane for more than 3 seconds unless they were actively guarding somebody close by. It was the league's modern fix for the same problem they had back in 47, stopping defenses from just clogging everything up and killing the offense.
So the method changed completely, but the goal-balancing offense and defense, keeping space, was still there in 2010.
Absolutely. That theme runs right through NBA history, starting with that 47 zone ban.
But the league wasn't just reacting to, general slowness. Pretty early on, they had to deal with specific players being too good.
Yeah. Enter George Mikan, the original dominant big man for the Minneapolis Lakers. He was so good down low that in 1951, they brought in what everyone called the Mikan rule.
What was he doing that was so problematic?
He just lived near the basket, parked himself right there. He was huge, skilled, almost unstoppable from that range. Defenses couldn't really do much without fouling him, so the league basically doubled the width of the foul lane. Went from a tiny 6 feet to 12 feet.
Wow, doubled it, just to push him away from the hoop.
That was the idea. Push Mike in, push other big guys out, make it a bit harder to score right at the rim, maybe encourage some more movement.
And did it work on Mikan?
Well, the impact's debated. Mikan was still a superstar, obviously. His scoring might have dipped slightly, some reports say, but it definitely opened up that area around the basket. It was really the first big rule aimed squarely at toning down the dominance of one specific player type, the post scorer.
And by 2010, that lane was even wider.
Yep, they widened it again in 1964 to 16 feet. And that 16-foot lane became the standard, the one we saw in 2010. So the 51 Mikan rule was step one towards that. It set a precedent. Okay, one guy's dominance shouldn't totally break the game's geometry. That thinking definitely carried through to 2010, informing rules about paint congestion, even when you had guys like Shaq or Dwight Howard dominating down low.
Okay, but if there's one rule change everyone knows, the one that, supposedly saved the league,
Yeah.
it's got to be from 54.
The 24-second shot clock, no question. This wasn't just a tweak, this was a revolution for the pro game. Like we said with the 1918 game, teams could literally just hold the ball for minutes to protect a lead. Games were slow, they were frustrating, just not fun.
Sounds like the league was genuinely in trouble.
It really was. Attendance wasn't great, popularity was iffy. The hero here is Danny Biasone, the owner of the Syracuse Nationals. He championed this idea. You need a time limit on possessions. He did this famous calculation, basically figured that in a good, fast-paced game, teams were taking a shot roughly every 24 seconds. So that became the number.
So the rule was simple. Get a shot up within 24 seconds of getting the ball.
Pretty much. Attempt a field goal, yeah. And crucially, they paired it with a new limit on team fouls per quarter, so teams couldn't just foul constantly to stop the clock and get the ball back.
The impact must have been, instant.
Instant and massive, seismic, really.
Yeah.
League scoring average jumped from about 79.5 points the year before to 93.1 in the very first year with the clock. That's like a 17% jump overnight.
Wow. So the game suddenly got way faster, way more exciting.
Totally. The whole pace, the flow we recognize today, it really started there. Fast breaks became a thing again. Teams had to actually do something with the ball. People say it genuinely saved pro basketball.
And the amazing part is, you look at 2010, 56 years later.
Still 24 seconds. Exactly 24 seconds. It's just one of those rules they got so right so early. It basically defined the tempo of the game right through 2010 and beyond. Just incredible foresight.
But the story of dealing with dominant centers,
Yeah.
it didn't stop with Mikan.
Nope, because after Mikan, you get Wilt Chamberlain, another guy who was just physically overwhelming in the paint. So 1964, the league looks at the lane again, the one they widened for Mikan, and basically says, still not wide enough for this guy.
So they widened it again.
Yep, from 12 feet to 16 feet.
And the reason was just Wilt.
Pretty much. It was another direct reaction to a single dominant force. The goal, again, was push him further from the basket, try to reduce that automatic advantage right under the hoop.
Did it slow Wilt down much?
Again, Wilt was still Wilt, incredibly productive. But yeah, the perception was it maybe affected his efficiency a bit, forced him to operate differently, and it definitely created more space around the hoop for everyone else, cutters, drivers. That 16-foot lane became the standard.
The standard that was still there in 2010.
Exactly. So this Wilt rule, as people call it, made sure the paint area in the 2010 NBA was way more spacious than in the early days. It prevented that extreme clogging you might have seen otherwise, and it was pretty crucial for the driving, slashing style that was so big for guards and wings by 2010.
Okay, so those early ones, banning zones, widening the lane twice, the shot clock, they really set the table, tackled pace, space, dominance.
Absolutely foundational. Set the stage for a faster, more open game. Now, as we get into the post-65 era, we'll see the league constantly tweaking, refining, adapting to new strategies, crazy athleticism, global stars, all leading towards that complex game of 2010.
All right, let's dig into that next phase. The game's getting faster, players are more athletic, coaches are getting smarter, the league's got to keep up. Starting around 66, some interesting tweaks to foul rules.
Yeah, 1966, they nudged the team foul limit down slightly, from 6 fouls per quarter to 5 before you hit the penalty and start shooting free throws. Maybe a small attempt to increase free throws a bit, punish defense slightly. But the more significant change within that rule was about the end of quarters.
Okay.
In the last 2 minutes of any period, teams only got 1 foul to give before the other team went to the line. It didn't matter how many fouls they had before that point in the quarter.
Ah, so that was aimed at stopping teams from just taking an immediate foul late in the quarter to stop the clock or prevent a fast break.
Exactly that. An early attempt to manage those end-of-quarter situations, stop cynical fouls, slowing everything down when time was precious. And what's remarkable is that structure, 5 fouls for the bonus, 1 foul limit in the last 2 minutes, that was still the rule in 2010. It stuck.
They also messed with illegal defense again around then.
They did, yeah. Trying to strengthen that anti-zone stance. They put in a rule saying a defender couldn't just hang out in the paint for more than 3 seconds if they weren't guarding their man closely. Kind of an early stab at a defensive 3-second concept, showing they were already struggling with guys kind of cheating the man-to-man rules.
And there was that really harsh rule about off-ball fouls.
Yeah, late 66, December, probably another reaction to tactics against dominant players. Maybe the Hack-A-Wilt stuff was picking up steam. They made it so an off-ball foul away from the play was penalized like a technical foul. One free throw, and the fouled team got the ball back.
Wow, one free throw in possession for just a regular foul off the ball. That
Yeah.
sounds really severe.
It was pretty punitive, yeah. And it didn't last in that exact form. It got relaxed later. But the idea, the principle of penalizing strategic off-ball fouls, especially late in games, that came back. By 2010, the rule for an away-from-play foul in the last 2 minutes was one free throw and possession, specifically targeting hack-a-shack tactics. So 66 was like an early, maybe clumsy version of something that evolved into a more targeted rule later on.
Okay, shifting to 68. Looks like some practical game flow kind of things.
Yeah, the 20-second injury timeout, player gets hurt, team has 20 seconds,
Okay.
either get a sub in or the player has to be ready to go. If not, you get charged a regular timeout. Basically stop teams using minor injuries for extra breaks.
Makes sense. Keep the game moving.
And they clarified what happens if you foul someone on an air ball, a shot that misses everything. If the offense fouled, turnover, no free throws. If the defense fouled, just a common personal foul. Cleared up some confusion there. Both those things, the injury timeout limit and the airball clarification, they were just standard procedure by 2010. Part of the background noise of managing a game smoothly.
Then 1970, a weird little statistical correction about free throws.
Yeah, this one's a bit quirky. Before 1970, if player A missed a free throw and his teammate, player B, tipped it in, the point for that tipped-in free throw, it actually went to player A, the original shooter.
Wait, what? The guy who actually made the basket didn't get the points?
Nope. Weird holdover, right. So the 1970 rule fixed it. Player B, the guy who tipped it in, gets credited with 2 points for the field goal, just making sure the stats actually matched what happened. And yeah, that was obviously the standard by 2010. Correct score gets the points.
The early 70s, 72, 73 seemed like a really busy period for tweaking fouls and timeouts again.
They really locked down the bonus concept then. Starting 72, 73, no free throws for common fouls until the 5th team foul of the quarter. That was big for reducing the constant parade to the free throw line earlier in periods.
And free throw lane violations changed too.
Yeah, 73. Players lined up along the lane could go in for the rebound as soon as the shooter released the ball. Didn't have to wait for it to hit the rim anymore, just sped things up a tiny bit after free throws.
And they kept trying to tighten up the late game timeout stuff.
Oh, yeah. In 73, they closed the loophole. Teams used to inbound in the backcourt late in the game, call timeout immediately, and get to advance the ball to half court. The new rule said, nope, you gotta actually get the ball across the half-court line before you call that timeout to advance it.
So really getting specific about stopping teams from gaming the system for time and position.
Exactly. And they put a limit on fourth-quarter timeouts, too. If you entered the fourth with, say, 4 timeouts, you could use them all, but no more than 3 could be used in the final 2 minutes. All steps toward controlling that frantic end-of-game pace. By 2010, that 5-foul bonus was totally standard, the lane entry rule was the norm, and those principles of limiting late timeouts and controlling ball advancement, they were fundamental, and actually got even tighter later on, like limiting teams to just 2 timeouts in the last 2 minutes by 2000.
Mid-70s. This looks like an interesting rule experiment that just didn't work out.
The force out, yeah, 1974. The rule basically said, if incidental contact forced a player out of bounds, it's a non-foul, offense just keeps the ball.
Okay, the idea being, don't reward cheap fouls or guys just driving into defenders near the sideline.
Right. Avoid rewarding defense for minor bumps. Don't penalize guys for just standing their ground. But, I mean, defining incidental contact, good luck with that. It was apparently a nightmare for a ref to call consistently. Lots of confusion, lots of arguments.
So it died a quick death.
Pretty much. Gone by 76 or 77. By 2010, it was ancient history. If contact forced you out, it was either a foul on the defender, maybe an offensive foul, or just a turnover. No special force-out non-call.
Other things from then that did stick. Looks like not granting timeouts right at the buzzer.
Yep, that stayed. Cleaner end to periods. Maintained by 2010. And that restriction on calling timeout immediately after inbounding in the backcourt late extended that to overtime, too. They also started cracking down more on fighting, doubling fines for ejections, though the penalties by 2010 were way, way beyond just fines. Ejections, suspensions became the norm.
Okay, late 70s. The ABA merger happens in 76. That brings in a different style, right? More physical. And the rules reflect that, allowing hand checking.
Yeah, the merger definitely brought in players used to a more, let's say, robust defensive style. So in 76-77, the rules actually codified it. Defenders could touch opponents with their hand or forearm as long as it wasn't clearly impeding their progress.
So this wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate choice to allow more physicality on the perimeter.
It seems so. Definitely swung things back towards the defense a bit, allowed that bump and grind style that was pretty common then, which again is fascinating compared to 2010 when hand checking was completely illegal. So this 76 rule was like a temporary permission slip that got revoked later as the league wanted more scoring and flow.
Okay. Anything else from that time?
Yeah, excessive elbow swinging became a violation too. It's a safety thing, basically. And that was definitely still a rule in 2010.
Let's talk officiating.
Eh?
They tried 3 refs, abandoned it, then brought it back for good.
Right, the 3 referee saga. First tried it in 78, 79. The thinking was games getting faster, need better coverage. But then apparently they decided it was too expensive, so they went back to 2 refs the next season.
Wow, cost cutting on refs. But they came back around.
They did. By 1988, the league was doing much better financially, and the game was just too fast, too complex for 2 pairs of eyes. So, starting 88, 89, 3 referees became the permanent standard.
But that was a clear upgrade, right?
Yeah.
By 2010, 3 refs was just how it was done. Better angles, better coverage, more accurate calls overall. Pure improvement for the game.
Absolutely. No question.
Okay, now, maybe the biggest rule change since the shot clock. The one that totally reshaped offense. Got to be the three-point line. Adopted from the ABA, brought into the NBA for the 1979-80 season. You had the 22-foot distance in the corners, 23 feet 9 inches everywhere else along the arc.
But teams didn't exactly jump on it right away, did they?
No, not at all. A lot of coaches, players too, were skeptical. Like, why shoot from out there? The usage was super low that first year, maybe 2.8 attempts per game for the whole league. The league wanted it to open things up, boost scoring, add strategy, but yeah, it took time.
But eventually, it became huge.
Transformative is the word. Completely changed court geometry, how defenses had to position themselves. By 2010, teams were taking around 18 threes a game. It spaced the floor, created the stretch 4, made offenses way more efficient, enabled crazy comebacks, just fundamental.
And there's that weird period in the mid-90s where they shortened it.
Yeah, 94 to 97, moved it into a uniform 22 feet all around, trying to juice offense even more, and it worked temporarily. 3-point attempts and percentages spiked. But they went back to the original distance 23-foot 9 arc, 22 mid corners for the 97-98 season. And that original distance was the one in place in 2010.
Yep. So the three-point line itself, revolutionary addition, totally defining the 2010 game, the experiment with shortening it, undone. Its impact is just impossible to overstate.
Okay, so hand in hand with the three-pointer and wanting more offense, the late 70s, early 80s, the league is still wrestling with defense, right? The whole illegal defense, anti-zone thing.
Oh, yeah, big time. They tried cracking down on hand checking again in 79, officially banning it, but enforcement was maybe inconsistent at first.
Take one, didn't quite stick yet.
Exactly. But the real obsession was enforcing man-to-man defense. By 81, 82, they had these super detailed, illegal defensive alignment rules, basically telling defenders exactly where they couldn't stand, especially guys on the weak side. Couldn't linger in the paint too long away from your man, couldn't really double team off the ball easily.
That sounds incredibly complex to ref, and probably really annoying for defenses.
It was. Very technical rules led to lots of whistles. And while it did prevent teams from playing actual zone for years, it also kind of led to that era of stagnant isolation offense. Because defenders were basically glued to their man, offenses knew help wasn't coming easily.
So the league was kind of stuck in this rigid defensive setup for a while.
For over a decade, really. But then, late 90s, 97, 98, 99, they started loosening those rules slightly. Maybe they realized it was hurting the game flow, allowed a bit more freedom for weak side help, kind of baby steps towards allowing zones again.
Which set the stage for the big change in 2001.
Exactly. 2001-02 season. Boom. They scrap all those complicated illegal defense guidelines. Effectively, zone defense becomes legal again for the first time in over 50 years.
Whoa. That must have been a shock to the system for players and coaches who'd only ever known man-to-man was mandatory.
Huge adjustment. Scoring dipped a little bit at first while teams figured out how to attack zones. But coaches adapted fast, started mixing in zones, using matchup zones, whatever. But, and this is the crucial part, they didn't just go back to the 1940s problem.
Because they added the defensive 3-second rule at the same time.
Bingo. The essential safeguard. Prevented defenders from just parking in the paint for more than 3 seconds unless actively guarding someone. That rule was key in 2010, kept the lane relatively open even with zones allowed. So by 2010, those complex 80s illegal D rules, gone. Zones. Legal and strategic. Defensive 3 seconds. Absolutely critical. And that 79 attempt to ban hand checking. The principle finally came back with teeth later on.
Okay, moving away from the court for a second, the 80s also brought big changes to league structure, money, integrity stuff.
Yeah, 83 was a big year for that. Playoffs expanded from 12 teams to 16 for the 83-84 season. 8 per conference. First round became best of 5. No buys. More teams got a shot.
And money stuff, too?
Yep. They put a cap on how much cash could be in a trade, $300,000 back then. Trying to stop rich teams just buying players off poorer teams. Aiming for competitive balance.
And a tough stance on drugs.
A really tough stance. Lifetime ban for heroin or cocaine convictions, though you could apply for reinstatement. It was a major move to deal with drug issues that were hurting sports and to clean up the league's image. By 2010, that 16-team playoff was standard. First round was best of 7 by then, though. The cash and trades limit principle was still there, just adjusted. And strong drug policies were definitely part of the CBA.
Then the mid-80s hit with maybe the 2 biggest structural changes that shaped the league by 2010.
Gotta be the salary cap, 84-85 season, and the draft lottery, 85. The salary cap, that was huge. An agreement between the league and the players' union to limit team payrolls.
Revolutionary for pro sports at the time.
Totally. Huge for competitive balance, huge for stabilizing the league's finances. Absolutely fundamental to how the NBA worked by 2010, influenced every single player contract, every trade. The draft lottery a year later tackled a different problem: tanking.
Teams losing on purpose for the top pick.
Exactly. Before the lottery, worst record got the number 1 pick, period. Which meant teams at the bottom had zero reason to win late in the year. The lottery introduced a random drawing, weighted, but still random, for the top picks among the non-playoff teams. Made it less certain the worst team got the best pick.
Changed the incentives completely for bad teams. Try to win.
It did. And the lottery, though the mechanics changed over the years, was still a massive part of the NBA calendar and team strategy in 2010. Oh, and also, around then, 84, they approved the 2-3-2 finals format, started in 85, mostly to cut down on travel. That format lasted all the way until 2013, so it was the standard for the finals in 2010.
Okay, beyond those huge shifts, the late 80s also fine-tuned rules for really specific, tricky situations, like buzzer beaters.
Yeah, the Trent Tucker 0.3-second rule came in around 89-90, named after a Knicks player who hit this controversial game winner with almost no time left. Big debate. Could he physically catch and shoot that fast?
So the rules set a minimum time for a catch and shoot.
Basically, yeah. The league studied it and said, okay, if there's less than 0.3 seconds on the clock when the ball is touched, you can only tip it in or score on an immediate alley-oop catch and dunk layup. No time for a traditional catch and shoot motion.
Specific, but important for clarity at the very end of games.
Absolutely. Avoids those impossible shots counting, ensures fairness based on, physics. That rule was definitely maintained in 2010, provided clear guidance for those split-second plays.
Moving into the 90s, player safety, physical play seems like a major focus. Flagrant fouls, fighting.
Yeah, there were earlier efforts, but it really got serious around 1990 with the 2-tier flagrant foul system.
Okay, what's flagrant 1 versus flagrant 2?
Flagrant 1 was for contact deemed excessive, but maybe not malicious, like a hard foul that wasn't necessarily trying to injure. Penalty was 2 shots and the ball, but the player usually stayed in the game. Flagrant 2 was for stuff deemed excessively rough and dangerous, like a wild elbow, a really unnecessary hard foul with intent. That meant automatic ejection, 2 shots and ball, plus almost certain fines and likely suspension.
That feels like a really significant step in trying to clean up dangerous play.
It really was. Gave refs clear definitions, clear penalties, made the game safer over time. By 2010, that system was totally understood, part of the fabric of the game. Definitely cut down on the really egregious stuff you saw in earlier eras. Then in 93, they added the point system, 1 point for F1, 2 for F2. Accumulate too many, you get suspended. Really ramped up the pressure.
And then the big one from that era, the bench rule.
Ah, yeah, the 93 rule about leaving the bench during a fight. Huge impact. Basically said, if you're on the bench, not in the game, and you step onto the court during an altercation, automatic ejection, automatic suspension.
That stopped the bench clearing brawls pretty effectively, right?
Dramatically. Before that, fights could easily escalate with everyone running on court. This rule made the penalty so severe automatic suspension that players learned quickly. By 2010, leaving the bench during a fight was basically unthinkable. A huge deterrent. All those things, the flagrant 12 system, the points, the bench rule were firmly in place and working by 2010. Big changes for player safety.
Okay, building on those earlier, maybe weaker attempts, the 90s and early 2000s saw this really sustained push against defensive contact on the perimeter. The hand-checking crusade.
Yeah, this was a multi-stage process. 94, they banned hand-checking from the backcourt baseline up to the opposite foul line. Then 97 added you couldn't use your forearm to impede a guy facing the basket in the front court.
Just kept chipping away at what defenders could do physically.
Exactly. By 99, full ban on hands or forearms on a player facing the basket above the free throw line extended. But the real knockout punch, the one that truly changed the game, was the stricter enforcement that started around 2004-05, the Freedom of Movement Initiative.
What did freedom of movement mean on the court?
It meant hand-checking was basically dead on the perimeter. Any little bump, any contact with hands or forearms that slowed down a dribbler or cutter, foul, is a clear message to officials. Call it tight.
And the impact of that final push.
Huge! Almost overnight, guards and wings had way more space. Scoring went up, pace felt faster, game looked more fluid. It really shifted the balance heavily towards offense, a massive moment.
So by 2010, hand-checking as it existed in, say, the 90s was just gone.
Completely gone. You couldn't touch perimeter players the way defenses used to. Defenses had to rely purely on footwork, positioning, help rotations. That ban was fully enforced by 2010, a defining characteristic of that era's offensive style.
Related offensive change, mid-90s, getting 3 free throws for a foul on a three-pointer.
Yep, 1994, if you got fouled shooting a 3 and missed, you got 3 free throws instead of the old 2.
Just logical, right? Match the potential points.
Exactly. Fair penalty for disrupting a higher value shot became standard practice, fully maintained by 2010, gave shooters a bit more protection on closeouts.
Safety and offense near the rim. That led to the no-charge zone.
Right, the restricted area. Introduced 97-98 season, that little half circle under the basket, 4-foot radius. If you're a defender standing inside that arc, you generally can't draw a charge on a player driving to the hoop who started their move from outside the zone.
Why put that in?
2 main reasons. Player safety, fewer guys sliding under airborne players trying to take charges, which is dangerous, and encouraging offense, giving drivers a clearer path, less worry about a last-second charge call right at the rim. It was a good rule, helped safety, fit the drive and kick era, fully standard by 2010.
Turn of the millennium, more rules aimed at pace and space, this time maybe targeting offensive players a bit.
Yeah, around 99-2000, the 5-second back-to-basket rule. If you were posting up below the free throw line extended, you couldn't just dribble with your back to the basket for more than 5 continuous seconds.
Trying to stop those long, slow post-up grinds.
Exactly. Speed up post play, make a move, pass it out, don't just pound the ball forever. That was in effect by 2010. Also around then, they tweaked the shot clock reset. If certain defensive fouls happened with the clock under 14, it reset to 14, not 24. Just another small tweak for pace.
And a big timeout overhaul around 2001.
Oh yeah, significant changes, aimed squarely at cutting down stoppages, especially late games. Total timeouts cut from 7 to 6 per team. Fourth quarter timeouts dropped from 4 to 3. And crucially, only 2 timeouts allowed in the final 2 minutes, down from 3. Plus, most full timeouts got shorter, 100 seconds down to 60.
Really trying to streamline the end of games.
Absolutely. They also clarified rules about advancing the ball after timeouts late in the game, made substitutions easier during 20-second timeouts. All those changes were the norm by 2010, leading to noticeably faster, less stop-start finishes compared to, say, the 90s.
Another pace booster came in 2001.
The 8-second backcourt rule. Used to be 10 seconds to get the ball across half court. They cut it down to 8 seconds for the 01-02 season.
Just forcing teams to get into their offense a bit quicker.
Exactly. Shave a couple seconds off every possession start. Added a bit more urgency, contributed to the overall faster tempo you saw by 2010. Standard rule then.
Playoff structure changed again in 2003.
Yep. The first round went from best of 5 to best of 7. Made all 4 rounds, both conferences, best of 7.
More games, more money, but also argued as fairer.
That was the argument, yeah. Longer series, less chance of a fluke upset, better team, more likely to win. And yeah, higher seeds probably did benefit. That all best of 7 format was totally locked in by 2010.
Okay, let's talk about the clear path foul. Protecting the fast break. That rule evolved quite a bit.
It did. Had a few definition tweaks. Started back in 84 as the breakaway foul. Foul from behind on a guy with a clear path, 2 free throws, and the ball.
So stop the cheap foul when a defender is beat on a fast break.
Yeah.
Harsher penalty needed.
Precisely. Keep the exciting plays going. Don't reward fouling just because you got beat. Then in 94, they clarified it applied even if the foul happened in the backcourt, as long as the path was clear ahead.
And the penalty got tweaked or re-emphasized later.
Yeah. Around 2007, seems like there was a push to make sure it was consistently called as two shots and possession, maybe clarifying against older interpretations. And in 2008, they refined the definition again, making sure everyone understood it applied from the backcourt too.
So the end result by 2010 was a rule that really discouraged just grabbing a guy on a clear break.
Exactly. It was a valued rule by then, protected the transition game, made defenders think twice about that cynical foul. Definition and penalty were clear and enforced in 2010.
Technology's role.
Ugh.
Instant replay starts creeping in.
Slowly at first. 2002, just for buzzer beaters. Did the shot get off in time?
Just get the biggest moments right.
Right. Then 2004 standardized it, a bit more foul, no foul calls at the buzzer, maybe fixing scoring errors. 2005 expanded again. Was it a 2 or a 3? Clock malfunctions.
Then it moved into reviewing judgment calls too.
Yeah, that was a bigger step. By 07-08, they could review flagrant fouls, player fights, let officials really look at the severity, help the league hand out discipline later too. It just kept growing. By 08-09, they could check 2s versus 3s anytime, fix clock errors found during reviews. By 09, the replay center could buzz down for certain things immediately.
So by 2010, replay was a pretty standard part of the game, especially crunch time.
Oh yeah. Routine, accepted. Sometimes it slowed things down, yeah, people complained about that. But it definitely made officiating more accurate on those crucial plays. Big part of game integrity by 2010.
No, not every change works out. That ball experiment.
Oh, the microfiber ball. Yeah, 2006-07 season. League decided to switch from the classic leather ball to this new synthetic composite one.
And the players did not approve.
Hated it. Absolutely hated it. Widespread complaints. The feel was wrong. The grip was bad. Some guys said it cut their fingers. It was a PR nightmare because the players felt like they weren't consulted properly on something so fundamental.
So the lead had to walk it back pretty fast.
Super fast. Only lasted about 2 months. January 1st, 2007, they announced, okay, we're going back to the leather ball.
Wow. Reversing a major equipment change mid-season. That's rare.
Very rare. Big cautionary tale. Don't mess with the core tools of the game without getting the players on board first. By 2010, leather was firmly back. Microfiber was just this weird, unpopular blip.
Okay, so that brings us right to 2010, our baseline. Looking back at all this, you really see how the game of 2010 was built piece by piece.
Absolutely. By 2010, the game was just incredibly dynamic, high-scoring, athletic, but also really strategic.
The three-pointer wasn't just there, it was central. Teams averaging close to 20 attempts a game, shaping everything about offense and defense.
Hand-checking was gone. That freedom of movement created space for perimeter stars like we'd never seen before, forced defenses into entirely different schemes.
Zones were legal, sure, but that defensive 3-second rule was crucial. Kept the paint from becoming a total parking lot, still allowed for driving and post-play.
Officiating had 3 sets of eyes, plus increasingly sophisticated replay for the big moments. More accuracy.
Playoffs. 16 teams, all best of 7. Established format, rigorous test. Pace was quicker, 8-second backcourt. Streamlined timeouts, especially late in games. Fewer long delays.
And safety was way better. The flagrant foul system, the no-charge zone, the clear path rule, the bench-clearing deterrent all made the game significantly less dangerous than in previous eras.
So the 2010 game, it was really this specific product of decades of tweaks, reactions, and innovations, a balance between offense, defense, safety, entertainment. Not the game of the 40s or 80s or even the late 90s, a distinct point in evolution.
It really was. And, while we focused on getting to 2010, the evolution obviously didn't stop there. The game keeps changing even now.
Yeah, the sources mentioned a few things even after 2010, showing it's always ongoing.
Exactly, like trying to adjust flopping in 2012 with fines, or changing how they called rip-through moves to stop guys just manufacturing fouls.
Playoff seeding got tweaked again in 2015, purely by record, ditching division winner priority. More straightforward fairness?
Yep, and they kept trying to curb hack-a-shack. 2016 extended that away from play foul penalty to the end of any quarter, not just the fourth.
Timeouts got cut again in 2017. Fewer allowed late, standardized length, always pushing for better flow.
And then a big one recently, the Coach's Challenge, introduced 2019, giving coaches a way to trigger replay on certain calls. Added another layer of strategy, another check for accuracy.
It just hammers home the point, right? The rule book is never finished. It's always being looked at, adjusted, based on what's happening on the court.
That's really the core takeaway from this whole journey. From those early, almost desperate changes to save the league, through decades of balancing offense and defense, adding huge concepts like the 3-ball, refining game flow, safety, using technology, It all led to that 2010 game and continues to shape the game today.
Every single change, big or small, played some part in creating the game we watch now, building on that 2010 foundation we talked about.
It really shows the league's willingness over the long haul to watch, to learn, to adapt, sometimes experiment, sometimes backtrack, but always aiming for this balance between competitive integrity and, well, putting on a good show.
So maybe next time you're watching an NBA game, you'll kind of see those layers of history in the rules, why they call defensive 3 seconds, why hand checking isn't allowed, why the three-point line is where it is. It all came from somewhere.
Yeah, and it leaves you thinking, right? The game keeps evolving. Players get more skilled, coaches get smarter, technology opens new doors. What's the next thing? What new strategy, what new type of player dominance, what tech advancement might force the league to rethink the rules again? How might the game look in another 10, 20 years, pushed even further beyond what we saw in 2010?
The deep dive never really ends. Thanks for joining us.